All right, so we are pretty much smack dab in the middle of our constructions unit here. And so we're going to continue along today and do a couple more types of constructions. But before we get too far into that, we do have some more vocab that we need to add on because you're going to see some of these vocab words show up today. So I'm going to add a couple more. So the last vocab word that we added the other day was parallel lines. So now we need to add on the next one. The next vocab word that you need to add on to your sheet here is going to be perpendicular lines. So right underneath parallel lines, we're going to add on the word perpendicular lines. So we talked about how parallel lines will never intersect. Do you guys know what makes perpendicular lines different? They are going to intersect, yes, so they're not going to act like parallel lines, but something special happens when perpendicular lines cross. Do you know what happens when they intersect? So anytime that two lines that intersect, if they're trying to be considered perpendicular, they have to form 90-degree angles, or we would maybe call those right angles. So not only do they cross, but they have to cross perfectly. So that means like one of the lines would be going like straight up and down, and the other line would be coming in going left and right, and it would make like a perfect intersection there. And it would have a little 90-degree angle box in the corner. That is required to be there in order for you to make the assumption that these lines would be perpendicular to each other. Okay, so that little box is not optional. It has to be there. Now we can also add on some points here for our lines. Because just like we had for parallel lines specific notation, we have a specific notation for perpendicular as well. So if I wanted to call these lines EF and GH, and I wanted to say that they're perpendicular, the symbol for that looks almost like an upside down T. Okay, so this is the symbol for perpendicular. Again, you might see that show up in directions for a problem when they're maybe giving you information in like a diagram. It's also just a really nice way that we have like a shorthand so we don't have to write out the word perpendicular all the time. Okay, and I'm going to have over here, I'm just going to add that little note that I talked about. You must have the 90-degree shown by that little like box in your diagram. Okay, you have to have that being shown in order to say that those lines are perpendicular. If it's not there, maybe they're intersecting still, but it doesn't necessarily guarantee that they would be perpendicular. So you have to make sure that that right angle is in there. Okay. All right. That's perpendicular. The other word that I want to add on, which is something that we've already talked about, but we just maybe didn't put it on our vocab sheet, and that is bisector. Okay, we've talked about bisector. This could be a line, could be a ray, could be a segment that intersects I'm going to say an object at its midpoint. I say object because we could bisect a line segment, we could bisect an angle, we could bisect like a shape. There's a lot of ways that bisector could be used and that you'll see it be used in the future too. So it could be a line that's acting like a bisector. It could be a ray that acts like a bisector. It could be just a segment. There's a lot of different options that kind of come into play when we're doing bisectors here. Remember what happens though with a bisector is that it intersects at its midpoint. Remember midpoint means like middle. So I'm just going to draw like a picture that kind of looks like perpendicular lines, but I'm going to try to make it a little bit different. So you might have something like this in your picture, and what they're trying to tell you here is that that line KL bisects that segment IJ at point M. So KL is that line that's going up and down. It intersects that segment IJ, because that one doesn't have the arrows on the ends there, right at M. And those two little markings that you see on either side of M, that's a way that they might show you in a picture that things are equal to each other. So if they have the same number of markings in the picture, they're trying to tell you that those sides would be equal to each other. So you might also see some sides have one dash, some have two, some have three, some have four. They can change like the number of sides that they have or number of marks that they have in order to show that things are equal to each other, okay? All right, so now we're gonna get into our constructing. So we should be on this page here. It should say at the top, constructions with bisectors. So let me get my screen switched over here, and we will get into our next set of constructions. Okay, so we should be on this page. And a couple of these that we're going to talk about today are kind of branching off of some of the constructions that we did actually earlier in this unit. So I'm hoping that some of what we talk about today won't necessarily be brand new information. It's just maybe extending on something that we've talked about in the past, okay? So the first things that they want us to construct are the perpendicular bisector of a line segment. You guys have already learned how to do the bisector, like you had to do the construction by finding the bisector. So we're basically going to do that same thing. It's just that we're going to add a little bit more detail to our pictures. Okay. So if you don't remember, when we were bisecting something, that was when we were cutting something in half. And in order to do that, we had to measure with our compass a little over halfway. So for this segment AB, if I think halfway is about maybe here, I'm going to go a little over halfway. And then remember what I did is we made marks or like really big arcs. We drew those from A and from B. So I'm going to do that again here. Move some of my stuff out of the way. And again, I like to move my paper. I feel like it just kind of helps me do my constructions a little bit better. Okay, don't be afraid to make these nice and big. You don't want to have to come back in and like redo it if you're making your arcs too small. Okay, so I just did one from A and now I'm going to do the same thing from B. Okay, so we've done this before. Do you guys remember what we did next? Yeah, we connected. Okay, we connected from here to that. So I'm going to do that now. I'm just going to draw that in. But now what I'm also going to do, because it's a bisector, that means it's going to cut this segment in half. So I'm going to go ahead and say this side gets 2 dashes and this side gets 2 dashes. That's symbolizing my bisector. And then for the perpendicular part, I'm just going to add that little box there in the corner. So it's the same construction as you did before, but you're just adding a little bit more detail to your picture. Okay, you guys go ahead and do the same thing over here to CD. Bisect that one, please. All right, I'm going to go ahead and do this one as well. And again, I'm going to need a box here in the corner, and then this time let's just do 1 dash on each side. Okay, just kind of switch it up. But you could do 2, you could do 3, you can really do however many dashes that you want on the middle there. Okay, any questions on creating those perpendicular bisectors there? Okay, so now what we're going to do on this next one is we're going to construct a line to a given line that's perpendicular. So we want to make a perpendicular line here, and it has to go through a point that isn't on that line. So you can see on both of these pictures, they're giving us this line here. We want to make something that's perpendicular to this, okay? But we want it to go through this point here. And over here, we want to make a line that's perpendicular to this one, and we want it to go through this point here. Okay, I'm going to kind of go through step by step with you guys, and I'm going to write out the steps as well, just so you guys can come back and use these again later if you need to. Okay, so what I'm going to do, let's call this point P. Okay, just because I'm going to maybe need to call that by a name, and so it's going to be easier if it has a label. Okay, so step 1 is I'm going to measure from P to somewhere on the line, and it doesn't really matter where on the line. You just don't maybe want to go like directly underneath it. So we're going to measure with our compass from P like over here, or we could do over here. It doesn't matter where though. So we're going to measure from P to the line, and we're going to draw an arc. Okay, so I'm going to set my compass. I'm going to put my pointer on P, and it does not matter where I go. So I'm just going to come off here to the right side, and I'm just going to measure about there. Hopefully you guys can see what I'm doing. I'm trying to angle my hand a little bit here. So I'm just going to measure from here to here. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw an arc. So from this point here, I'm going to go ahead and just kind of draw an arc that goes all the way through here. So it's going to go underneath this line, and it's going to kind of come over the other side here. So I'm actually going to put my paper upside down to do this. Okay, so I'm putting my pointer on P, and I'm just going to draw an arc like this. Okay, so you can kind of see how it goes underneath my paper there, underneath my line, I should say. Okay, maybe I'll move that up a little bit so you guys can see that. Okay, and then let's go ahead and it intersected twice, so let's give these names too. Let's call this one A, and let's call this one B. Okay, that's just going to help me keep things straight here. All right, so now using the same measurement, we're going to move our pointer. We're going to move to A and B, and we're going to draw intersecting arcs. Okay, I'll give you a chance to write that down. Okay, this might interfere a little bit with my writing down here, and I also need to double check that I didn't adjust my compass because I think I smushed it a little bit here, so I'm just checking that. Okay, so I'm going to move my pointer down here to B, and I'm going to draw an arc. Now, I'm going to do it underneath here, so it is going to go into the letters, like all my writing that I've done, but that's okay. So I'm going to go from B, and I'm going to go ahead and draw an arc here. I'm going to go to A, and I'm going to do the same thing. So I've got my pointer at A. I know my paper's upside down, and I'm going to do the same thing, draw another arc. Okay, so I'm going to flip this right side up. I put my pointer at B, and I drew an arc here. Okay, that's how I got that one. And then I put my pointer over here on A. See if I can hold this with my left hand. And I did the same thing. I drew another arc going this way. Okay. The last step here is to draw in your perpendicular line through those intersections. So the intersections here should connect up to P. And then you should be able to draw that in. Okay, and this line here should look like it's perpendicular to AB. So once you get those arcs drawn in, you just need to connect those using your paint stick, and it should connect up through that P as well, and it should look like it's creating a perpendicular line. Okay, why don't you guys go ahead and try to do that one on your own. Okay, I'm going to start going through mine here. So I'm just going to measure from P. I'm going to come right here to this point. Okay, and then I'm going to draw an arc. So again, I'm going to flip my paper upside down to do this. I'm going to go a little bit shorter. Okay. Okay, set that down. We'll call this one A. We'll call this one B. Using that same measurement, I'm now going to go to these. I'm just going to double check that my compass didn't change. Okay, so from B, I'm going to draw an arc. And from A, I'm going to draw an arc. Okay, so I've got something that looks like this, and then I'm just going to draw in that perpendicular line. And it should cross through P there. Put arrows on either side since we're doing a line, and make sure you put that 90-degree angle box in the middle. All right, do we have any questions on how to do either of those constructions? Okay, we've got one last one to do here today. Let me fold my paper. This last one is about how to bisect an angle. Okay, so we've talked about how to bisect segments. Now let's talk about how we're going to bisect an angle. What I'm going to do for step one is I'm going to measure from the vertex to an arrowhead, and I'm going to draw an arc. Okay, so kind of like what we were doing when we were copying an angle, we need to measure one of the sides of the angles here. I'm just going to go with the shorter side again. So for this first one, I'm going to measure the length of this. So I'm just going to go from this pointer here up to the arrowhead. Okay, so I'm just measuring there. And then I'm going to draw an arc through the picture. Like so. Okay, the arc is going to be kind of what we use now to finish this problem. So step two is using this arc. We're going to treat this like a midpoint problem. So if you remember when we were doing midpoint or like the bisector on just a regular segment, we would, let me get that out of here. We would measure a little over halfway. So from the pointer here, I'm going to think about like where's halfway on my arc. Well, it's probably about here. So I'm going to go a little bit over. And remember, we would draw two arcs. So I'm going to draw an arc from each end point here. So I'm going to draw one from here. Okay, and then I'm going to move my pointer up to the other side, and we're going to draw another arc. So I'm going to kind of flip my paper here. So I'm putting my pointer here, and we're going to draw an arc through the picture. Okay, so I'm just going to repeat what I did. I'm going to face this upright. So I measured a little over halfway the arc. I put my pointer on this end down here where that angle that I drew in connected. And I drew this big arc here. So I just went like that. And then I went and put my pointer up here instead. And I did the same thing. I drew another angle or another arc there. Now that we have that done, we should be able to connect those intersections to that vertex point. So just kind of connecting from here to the vertex, like so. And this should be your bisecting ray in this case. That means that this side of the angle here should be equal to this side of the angle here. So just like when we had segments where they would give them dashes, you're going to see that on angles as well. But instead of dashes, they're going to use like little tiny arcs inside of the angles to symbolize that they're equal to each other. Okay. All right. Why don't you guys go ahead and try to bisect this angle? All right, I'm going to start working through this one here. So it doesn't matter which one you measure to. I'm just going to go off to this side here. I'm going to draw an arc through my picture. Okay, using that same arc here, I'm going to go a little over halfway. I might need to unfold my paper for this. Give me 1 second here. And I'm going to draw an arc from this endpoint. And I'm going to draw an arc from this endpoint. Okay, then I can come back here and I'm going to connect those intersections to the vertex here. So there's my bisecting ray, which means this side of the angle should be equal to this side of the angle. All right, any questions on how we bisect angles? Okay, so we're going to get you guys homework here again today so you can practice these constructions as well.